because then everybody gets to see you twice.
I know, just poking.
Well, welcome everybody to Tuesday Night Live.
It's the best night of the week.
We're excited to join you once again. I am Dean Nixon. This is lovely Kate Semmens.
Meh.
And we are coming to you live from sunny St. George, Utah.
Mm-hmm.
And we are super stoked to be back with you and be able to present to you life coaching topics or personal development or personal growth concepts that you can learn from, grow from, and most importantly, you can share with others in your life around the dinner table or
The water cooler.
and she'll hit that ball
This time.
I'll pitch that. And so we are excited as always to join you. We've got great opportunities for you to get involved. We've got our Monday night group or our groups that we do. We've got our webisodes that you can watch, all sorts of different ways. Please get involved and reach out to us in any way you need.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's just dive in, shall we?
Let's do
to
it.
Tonight's topic. Hello, by the way, to everybody popping in on
Hey.
Instagram. By the way, I'm just going to say this real quick. So we're over here on YouTube and we're right here on Instagram, and we're going to be uploading this to Facebook later tonight and all the things. People, we only need 15 more subscribers to our channel and we could have our own name on it.
That would be amazing.
That would be amazing.
Make it so much easier for people to find.
So wherever you're watching this, jump over to YouTube and just subscribe. Just subscribe it and like it, and we will just be so grateful to you for doing that for us.
It'll make it easier for people
To find it and all that stuff. Shameless plug. Go do it, please. We
I
would
love
be
it.
so grateful for that.
I love it.
But our topic tonight, it's been fun watching the evolution, I think, these last few weeks as we've had things drop into our heart and things we want to be talking to you guys about, because I feel like tonight's conversation kind of ties it all together.
Yeah.
Where maybe it's felt a little bit like, oh, here's this thing, and here's this thing, and tonight's like, oh, isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
Here we can bring them all together
Yeah.
and find the common thread through it all. So a few weeks ago last week we were talking about will and surrender. We've been in kind of that space a couple weeks ago about, hey, it's okay if you set all these goals for the new year and you're kind of really struggling to maybe still get them kind of off the ground a little bit. We talked about that a couple weeks ago, remember? And tonight, our topic is
Acceptance of self.
acceptance of self.
Yeah, the ongoing, it just, I was telling Kate, I think we've talked about this. She said, Dean, we've talked about everything. I mean, we literally have, I don't even know how many of these things.
3 full years
Yeah,
of Monday Night Live.
Of Monday Night Live. So with that, we've covered a lot of these topics, but we want to talk about it
Absolutely.
again. And it really comes from this challenge that we have as human beings, which is to really be comfortable within our own skin. And it kind of is, it hinges on a couple pieces. Number one is we believe inherently that there is a right way to do things and a wrong way to do things. And we've been programmed with this thinking since we were little children. Now, there's some truth in that when it comes to objects, when it comes to ways of producing certain things or doing things, as far as like putting an engine together or, baking a cake. There is a certain process of steps that go to that. But as far as being a human being, other than your moral compass, that moral compass inside of you that is inherently telling you this is inherently what I won't do, this is unhealthy, these things, we have got caught up in this right way or wrong way. So conversations, we don't want to have conversations because we don't want to feel awkward.
Right.
We don't want to confront somebody because we may make them mad or we may do something wrong. And so we get into this place where we get into the self-loathing, the lack of self-acceptance because of this right and wrong aspect that we get in. And the second reason that we struggle with accepting ourselves and really being in that place is we truly believe on some level that there's an arrival point.
Yes, I knew you were going there.
Because it's the base of everything. We believe there's some form of arrival point where you will never say anything silly again or embarrass yourself. You will know all the right answers. You will your kids will be perfect. You'll have the perfect job. You'll, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right. And so as a result of this dysfunctional thinking, as a result of this unhealthy, inaccurate thinking, our inability to really just flow through life is problematic.
Absolutely. And so as I'm staring at these screens, thinking about all the different ways that I get caught up in not acceptance of self and getting sucked into right and wrong and that arrival point place, right? I think another huge culprit that takes us down that path is when we get into comparison of ourselves with others, right?
Yeah.
And we've talked about this. Lots of people talk about this. This is not new information in our day right now, that our beautiful, incredible technology that we have, that we take incredible advantage of, gives us an inaccurate lens of our life.
Absolutely.
Because we compare, I will just speak for me, right? I compare my hard days or my normal days against all y'all's vacations, your graduation photos,
right.
your beautiful picture perfect Norman Rockwell Christmases, all the things that we're just always looking at through this glass window, which then makes me sometimes, right? And I know I'm not alone, so I'm speaking for us, right?
100%.
It gives us that perspective that we're doing it wrong.
Correct.
Why is it harder for me to do ABC, right? Or to get XYZ or whatever that looks like.
Yeah.
In that view.
That view.
Mm-hmm.
And the inability to be authentic.
Yes.
The inability to be real. And that's a challenge. And I see it a lot in people. They don't want to be real, they don't want to be open, and some of it I understand. They are around people that are emotionally immature, and they don't have the capacity to be comfortable with vulnerable people. And so as a result of that, maybe they've seen people get mocked or teased or ostracized or talked about behind their backs because of the emotional immaturity of other individuals and their lack of self-acceptance. And so that becomes very fearful. Like, I don't want to be vulnerable. But the more vulnerable that people are, the more that you can just go, look, I'm just like that authenticity you just shared. Like, I hope people really appreciate what she just shared, because she's telling you a truth. I know her. I know this is a truth for her, that she does get in the same trap that you do, that I do. We all get in the trap. But for some reason, we have this belief that people that are talking heads on screens know all the answers and have it all figured out. And I'm here to tell you that's not true. I think one of the biggest frustrations I have is there's a philosophy out there that was saying that you don't listen to people about being successful in business unless they're a successful businessman. Don't listen to people who are rock solid in parenting unless their kids are rock solid, kids. Don't listen to, and so what happens is we create this qualifiers, and that's, I think, one of the other thing that creates this fear and this lack of acceptance of self is we have these worldly, qualifiers that we've used to measure ourselves against, as you said, and compare ourselves against all these amazing qualifiers. I dare you, those of you watching, to sit down sometime this week between now and next Tuesday night. I dare you to make a list of your top 10 qualifiers that you use to determine who you are and how you're showing up. So if there's a part of your life, like if you don't like your body, if you don't like the way you're parenting, if you don't like your relationship, if you don't like the way your job or whatever, I dare you to sit down and make a list of 10 qualifiers you compare yourself to, and I guarantee you it's going to be extremely enlightening.
Yes, absolutely. I will add to his dare for you to be honest with yourself, because I think that we can just bullshit ourselves. Pardon me if that offended anybody, right? We can just be dishonest. Be like, oh, these are my top 10 qualifiers, and kind of take take experiences like this, right? Put ourselves in the learning seat to seek to understand ourselves better, and not actually go up to bat for ourselves, right? Like to just kind of like, oh yeah, I for my body, my qualifiers are my sister, and maybe just do a little softball pitch when like, nah, girl, like your qualifier is this thing, right?
Yeah.
Like, and getting really honest with yourself about it.
Yeah,
that's hard homework, Dean.
It is hard homework. It is hard homework, and I want to challenge us with it, because these qualifiers that we're using are creating that lack of acceptance of ourselves. So we get into that space, and this is such a big topic, such a big subject. And so I'm trying to kind of shotgun blast a little bit here, but these are some of the main pinch points that we're running into that we've got to be aware of. And the more authentic and honest we are about who we are as human beings, and we can look at that without judgment, that's such a critical piece, to be able to stand up and go, yeah, like I struggle with this. I don't think it's healthy for a parent to overshare about their child's struggles as like, well, my child's doing all this, my child's doing all that, as a way to say, well, I'm just being authentic. I'm saying it's healthy for a parent to go, I struggle with insecurities because my child's behaving this way. I struggle believing whether I'm a healthy parent because I said these things to my child and I'm worried that those things are making them this. That type of authenticity where we're not outing somebody, right? And that's what I'm talking about, like where we're taking, and there's a difference between taking your fears of what other people think and how they'll see you and venting those out and verbalizing those. And then there's the other side of it where we're looking at, how am I comparing myself to other people? How am I disowning myself or disconnecting from who I am?
Absolutely. It's like beautiful accountability within your own like opportunity to be authentic, right? Like and talk about maybe where you feel like you're struggling. Yeah, I really like that. So let's talk about this idea of the journey then, right? Like journey and self-acceptance, like, because I feel like that is another thing. I would ring 1,000 bells and be like, you hit it right on the head there with that one, Dean, as far as like this arrival point, in like looking at life as having an arrival point instead of just being a journey, right? That really can capture us into that right or wrong place in our mind and our thinking with it. So maybe talk about that for a second.
The journey itself, yeah. Well, and I think it's interesting because, part of the thing that we are always talking about with our work, because we work with emotions. And that's one of the toughest things to truly navigate through is our emotions. And we are all emotional beings, and we really are impacted by our emotions and how we feel. But we understand that our emotions are an experience, right? The belief is what drives the emotion. And the emotion is how we experience the belief. The emotion is how we experience the thoughts that we're having. And so when I have a belief or I have a thought, I experience an emotion as a result of those types of things. Well, our emotions are things that we're still trying to navigate through. And this is kind of one of the points I was talking to Kate before we jumped online, is my era, they call us, I'm the first of Gen X, so going into Gen X and then the boomers before us, emotions weren't something we really were taught and talked about. And nobody really spent time on this journey of emotions just saying to us like, hey, like it's okay to feel this way. It's okay to be, understand that yes, you're angry, but underneath the anger is sadness, or underneath the anger is fear, underneath the anger is, these emotions. Nobody taught us any of that. We didn't have that education. So when we became parents, our hope was, we're going to change that. We want to make it okay for our kids to have emotions, even though we won't allow ourselves to.
Still, yeah.
We still, I personally judge myself for having them. But as a result of that, we told our kids that it's okay to have emotions, but we didn't have the ability to give them tools to navigate it. So now our children go, okay, I have all these emotions, but I don't know what to do with them, and I'm being honoring my emotions. And so now we see the ripple effect of that with these, these next generations that are coming with all these emotions. I think what happens is we are judging people based upon their coping skills and their ability to handle their emotions. And most of all, we're doing that to ourselves in our journey. We're judging our journey's ability to handle our emotions. Am I making sense at all? Hopefully. Give us a thumbs up if I'm making sense. Or a thumbs down. But the reality is that all of a sudden we're honoring and we're respecting all these emotions, but we don't necessarily have the tools to navigate through them. We're starting to treat our emotions as though they're facts, and that's what a truth is because I feel a certain way.
Right.
And because I feel this way, it's a truth. Well, that's not necessarily true, but wait a minute, they tell me to honor my gut. My gut says this, so it must be true. Well, yes and no. And that's where we have to really start using that discernment, where we use the heart and the head. We balance them with what I know to be true and what I feel to vet what the fact is, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So we've got to take the truths with the feelings to vet. We can't just make decisions off of feelings. We can't just make decisions all the time off of thoughts, because sometimes our thoughts are insensitive, and that's the generation we came from. It's just, if you think it, just do it, and it's the right way, and there's a right way and a wrong way, and da-da-da. It doesn't matter emotions. We don't care if you don't like it. Well, now the world's balanced itself, but we swung from over here where it's all about right or wrong, no emotion, just do it. Who cares what your thoughts and feelings are? Suck it up, put dirt in it, and move on.
Right.
To over here where it's like, well, what does your gut say? What does your gut say? What does your gut say? There's a balance. And the balance is using both, where you're bringing the heart and the head together. So I'm pointing up here for heart and the head together, and you're bringing them together to vet the decisions that you're making to honor the emotions. And I think that's what's hard, is a lot of times we're judging our journey because we don't like the emotional discomfort. We don't like all this emotion that's coming up. And so we're not accepting our journey.
Right.
So hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah. And that self-acceptance piece in all of that is just really truly beginning to buy into this idea that it is a journey, first of all, right? And like working to get rid of that notion in my mind that like there will be an arrival, right? Like, and that day of relief will come, and I will be the most wealthy, beautiful, amazing, accoladed human that ever there was, right? That's my arrival point.
Right.
Like that's not real. That's not real when we do this, right?
No.
But knowing that life is a highway. Now we're going to get into all these songs, right? And for me too, part of that like self-acceptance piece is understanding that journey is also not this beautiful straight line that just takes us, right? Like it's kind of messy sometimes, like all the time. If you're in Kate Semmens' incarnation, it's like craziness always like going on, right? And so understanding that life sometimes is cyclical, right? In our journey, in our experience of it, we come back around and we ask ourselves all the time, like, why did I do that again? I'm here again, and why can I do that? And and we get into all of our criticism and self-judgment. But being able to pause right there, right? And be like, okay, hang on. What am I comparing this to, right?
Yeah.
Am I in reality with this? Am I caught up in some magic of the mind or some crazy emotion of the heart, right? Or am I being authentic? Am I being kind to me? Am I looking at this honestly? Am I in comparison with somebody else? And why wouldn't it be okay if I had a hard way in yesterday?
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Like, just getting real.
There you go. Yep.
Like, why isn't that just the way that it is? And then looking, I think for me too, the next piece that comes naturally is anchoring back into the why I'm doing what I'm doing.
Absolutely.
Right?
Staying focused on
what I want to be experiencing, what we want to be intending, what the direction we want to be going.
And that's, I think, the most important part. And I know we got a comment up there. I can't read it.
It's so hard.
So
Hi, I'm going to get real close, Instagram. Oh, Justin just said, I'm offended.
Oh.
We don't know where you offended,
I don't know what part, Justin.
Probably the right or wrong piece.
I apologize if I offended you. But it's this idea, and I know Justin, he's kidding.
Joking.
He's totally kidding. But there's this piece where staying focused on the purpose of the journey. And it just reminds me of this young man. Years ago, okay, so a lot of you already know that my part of my experience through my career has been developing, running, creating treatment programs for youth, for teens and their families, etc. Mm-hmm. And I remember one year we went to do a pickup from the airport, and I was really confused because this young man was flying to us, and he was coming from back east, and he was flying in, and that was like the first clue. On his own.
Yeah.
Like most of the time
they don't really come willingly.
They don't come willingly. Well, he comes, and we go to pick him up at the airport down in Las Vegas, and he's got like 3 giant bags. And that was my first clue that he has no idea what's happening. Mm. So we get him in the car, and we start driving, and we start realizing that he's been sold a line. His parents have totally lied to him. They said he's going to some retreat, and et cetera, et cetera. And so he's packed all of this, or these 3 suitcases he has packed. Mm. Well, come to find out, this young man had been living a life where he wasn't really struggling. He wasn't really getting out of his comfort zone. He wasn't really doing things. His life looked perfect from the outside. He was in all the right classes. Mm-hmm. He was driving the cool cars. He was wearing like all designer things. He had a watch more expensive than my dream watch could be. Like it was just obvious that this young man had grown up in a way that looked like that straight line you're talking about. But I come to find out, he didn't even pack his bags. No, his maid packed his bags.
Oh, wow.
So he didn't even know it was in his bags. Mm. So we had to, obviously, that was a whole thing I won't go into. But eventually he goes out, the program we at the time, we had a program that for the first 30 days they went out into the wilderness and they pulled a handcart. And the staff out there handed him an orange. So they handed him an orange, and he looked at it, and he goes, "What do I do with this?" And they said, "You eat it." And he's like, "Well, what is it?" "It's an orange."
Wow.
And he's like, "It doesn't look like an orange." And they said, "Well, you have to peel it." He's like, "Well, how do you peel an orange?" So, "You've never peeled an orange?" He's like, "No, I have a maid that does all that. I have my food prepared for me. I have all this. I've never done any of this type of thing in my life." So it was really amazing to me to realize that even though on the outside his life looked like that straight line and everything was perfect, there was a whole skill development that wasn't being created. Mm. Mm. And he wasn't learning how to do basic things that your challenges and your struggles give you. So when you're going through a rough time being a parent, you're not a bad parent. You're developing skills. When you're going through a rough time as an employee and maybe having a hard time with a boss or a co-employee, you're not a bad employee. You're not a bad person. They're not the problem. You're not the problem. You're learning. Yeah. And when you can use your idea of I am learning as a mode of travel in this journey, and that every challenge, every obstacle you're grateful for because it gives you a lesson and it teaches you a skill, then no matter what comes at you, you will always have gratitude in your heart, and you will navigate through it, and you will be always authentically open in that space. Mm. And most importantly, you'll know how to peel an orange.
I love it. Well, that's all the time we have for tonight. So hopefully you've grabbed some little nuggets that you're going to hang on to this week as you, like me and like Dean, are going to work on being more in acceptance of ourselves, more along for the ride, right?
That's
Along
right.
for the teaching, like just
Yep.
being in it, in this human experience that we all get to be a part of. And don't forget to do your homework, though. Make that list of 10 qualifiers in all the places that you judge yourself so hard about, right?
And then work to move away from it.
Right. Work to see how that isn't true, right?
Absolutely.
That's the thing, too. So we love you. We wish you a most marvelous week. And we'll see you next Tuesday Night Live.
See ya.